Welcome to the Financial Coaches Podcast, where we talk about how to build your practice from startup to scale up while being the kind of coach your clients crave. Finally, a podcast for financial coaches. Here are your hosts, Maria Casillas and Cody Sizemore.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Financial Coaches Podcast. My name is Cody Sizemore and I'm joined here by my lovely co-host Maria Casillas. And today we are going to be talking about a very sought after and asked for subject, which is coaching curriculum tips. So we're going to take a deep dive into that and kind of just tell you guys, what we personally do, and also what we think, might be some good options for you guys, to maybe think of and get some inspiration from as well. But before we do any of that, we just want to take a moment and acknowledge those of you who are our every weekers. And those are the people who listen to this show every week, every time that we, release a new episode. We've been finding more and more of you guys coming out of the woodworks claiming as, you guys are every weekers. It's like a badge of honor for you guys, and we love it. So yeah, we've been seeing more and more people commenting on different things within our Facebook group. And, kind of like wearing that badge of honor. And every time I see it, I just think it's so cool. So, but speaking of the Facebook group as well, if you're not a part of that, join in. It's free to join. We have some people in there who are asking questions. We always drop our new episodes every week. And, we ask questions from you guys as well, from time to time, just to get new topics to talk about on this show and to support you guys as well. And that Facebook group is called the Financial Coaches. Wait a second. Now, Maria always does this. She's the one who always messes up the Facebook group title. We changed it.
And now I pass that on to you.
Yes. Okay. All right. We're going to rewind here for a second. It is called the Financial Coaches Community by New Money Habits. So we changed the name 2 or 3 months ago. So we're still
longer than that. We've been screwing it up way longer than that. Used to
it. So anyways, pay no attention to how I just botched that, but we would love to have you there. It's a growing community. It's a great spot to be. And that's how we get connected with you guys, and it's an awesome time. So with all that being said, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm just going to, welcome in Maria. So
now he's going to let me mess up.
That's right.
I'm doing well. Thank you. I'm glad to be here with you as always. I am battling allergies right now, so I'm going to try really hard not to sniff and cough and all of that to all of you, and rub eyes for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. But yeah, I think this is actually a really important topic. And I know, like you mentioned at the top, Cody, that this is sought after. And I think what I was telling you before we even hit record today is I kind of wish that we had a group of people in front of us who we could bounce these questions off of, because I think that the idea of the question, what do I put in a curriculum, is so broad and there's so much underlying in there that I kind of wish I knew what really are you looking for. And so I do invite each and every one of you listeners today. We're going to talk about this in a more broad and structured way. But if there's something that we missed because you're like, oh, I wanted this specific detail, let us know. Definitely reach out to us, because we probably have the ability to have a conversation with you about that and have that discussion, but we just aren't sure exactly what it is that you're looking for. So let's just dive right into what we know we think is important for you as you are kind of coming up with this. Now, most people who are asking this question are probably brand new. They're either brand new or they just shifted and they're trying to figure out how do I offer, a curriculum for here. So the first thing I would say that is so important for you to know before you even think about what type of curriculum to put out there is to answer the question, who's your audience? Now, that's super important, because it could be whether you're talking about an avatar. I'm not even talking about that, but you could okay, what is that avatar that I'm talking to, et cetera. But we've also talked on this show about the difference between individual one-on-one coaching and group coaching. And I think that if you have a group, that probably will have a slightly different curriculum than the person who you're talking one-to-one. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as well. Also, are you talking mostly to singles? Are you talking to couples? Are you talking to teenagers versus grown adults? That's going to have an impact as well. Excuse me. So I think that that's another thing that you want to make sure you know, because even though we're going to give you some structure to some of this, like certain components that we think are important in just about any curriculum, it's going to change based on who you're talking to. So if you have, for example, just a retirement, for example, the way you talk to somebody who is, say, 22 about retirement might be a little bit different than the way you structure curriculum around somebody who's like 65, right? Mm-hmm. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind as we go through some of these things. So who is your audience? Now, I think there are some components that are really, really important. And Cody, I'm going to have you weigh in on this as well, because I know that you have a whole lot of insight for us on this. But I think one of the first things to consider is what somebody's relationship is with money. So you want to make sure that you have the ability to ask the right questions. We've talked about this before on the show. I'm not going to give you the specific questions today, but you do want to make sure that you're not just looking at numbers. We talk about that all the time on here. But we want to be able to ask the person or get from them, what is their relationship with money, and who are they kind of wanting to become anyway? So you'll see some of the goal setting and stuff in that as well. Before I jump into another thing, what would you say, Cody, about that piece of it?
I think it's super important. In fact, that's the very first meeting that I have with people before we even jump into the numbers. Because I think it's important for us as coaches to really understand a person's relationship with money before we start, hopping into numbers and talking with them about, what we maybe should try and do to, accomplish their goals, but still, give them the life that they want to live. Because if you don't do that, then you really won't know that, and you'll kind of like fall into like this cookie cutter kind of thing. And it might not be good for them, So I think that's really important. But it's also important for them to know that too. Sometimes people don't even realize what their relationship with money looks like. They don't really understand themselves and how they view money, think about money, behave with money. So if they're able to have an opportunity to actually like understand that on a deeper level and maybe figure out some new things about themselves, then that's also going to be very beneficial to both you and the client as you start moving forward into the numbers and the game plan and, all that kind of stuff. So I think that's very, very important, which is why I have it as my very first session in my curriculum.
Okay. Yeah. So other than really well-crafted, open-ended questions, what do you think are some of the things that we can do to help people discover their relationship with money, help us to use that when we are going into some of the more like structural tool type things?
Yeah. Open-ended questions is always the name of the game. But I have found that there's really three things that I will ask someone to really help me get a good picture and also help them get a good picture as well. Which is like, hey, my ideal client, like maybe they haven't been someone who has really tried working on their finances a ton in the past. Like they haven't been doing like a monthly budget. This is maybe their first time reaching out to someone for support, that kind of thing, right? So I'd ask them like, hey, what do you think held you back from those things before? What made it difficult? Did you try something and it didn't work? Like, what did that look like? And then the other side of the coin, why now? Like, why do you want to do this now? What's pulling you to step into this call? Like, we're on this call for a reason. You're in this program for a reason. 3 months ago wasn't the right time for you, but now it is. So why is that? So just to kind of like get like a good feel for them in those regards. I also take a deep dive into people's pain points with money. So just things that, aren't really serving them, or they're working against them, or it's unhealthy, or, it's that thing that they're like, oh, I wish that I was better with this, or I wish I wouldn't do that, or whatever it might be. Could be a behavior, could be a mindset, a belief system, thought pattern around money, whatever it is, and just kind of exploring that a little bit from there. And then I also jump into their upbringing as well. And that's super important. Super important. I always save that one for last because it's usually the one that is a little bit more emotional for people. So, but that one in particular is probably one of the most telling ones of any of them. I think that it kind of goes in that order, like, why not, why now, pain points, and then upbringing. Like it's like surface level, medium, deep kind of thing. And like I've just found that those three areas really paint a really good picture.
Yeah, I really like that. So, you mentioned that you do that as like one of the first sessions. You're not talking about the, for lack of a better word, the discovery session, right? You're talking about like once they've already signed on with you, this is part of your overall curriculum with them.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay. So I think when a lot of people hear the word curriculum, we think school, we think, worksheets and certain subjects and that kind of thing. Is there something, do you think, that we need to make sure that every curriculum includes when it comes to that kind of thing? Or are we looking more at, you just have a certain number of really great questions that bring more information and it almost looks a little bit more like therapy?
I would say if you're talking one-on-one, the latter. Just conversational based. Okay. Obviously, you'll have a few tools here and there, but having a workbook for one-on-one, I don't know, it just feels weird to me. But in my group coaching, you're speaking one to many, so having a workbook is beneficial. It helps them, get more specific to just them, and then also it helps me to look at their workbooks and to be more specific with them when I wouldn't have time to go deep into every single question with every single person. I can just look at it and be like, okay, so this is what's sticking out to me. Boom, 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 boom. Really quick, like, here's your feedback kind of thing, So one-on-one, yeah, I would say probably not a workbook setting, but group, I would say, yeah, I probably need something.
Okay. So you mentioned the word feedback, which I think is really important. And I'm thinking that oftentimes this will not just relate to or rely on, the clients, but it might also rely on the personality of the coach. So if you're listening and you are the type of person who's very uncomfortable with just, open-ended questions and understanding what it means and being able to reflect that back, I do encourage you very strongly to practice that skill, because that is one of the skills that you need to be a really effective coach, is to be able to reflectively listen to them. But let's just say maybe you need something that's a little bit more tangible for that feedback. You want to be able to give that back to the client. It's very possible that you can use some of the worksheets or, I guess worksheets is a school word. I don't know if it's the right word, but definitely something that's more written and something that they can take home and do. You can use exercises that you write up. I don't know if there are resources out there that kind of have that already done for you. Do you know if there are, Cody? I've never sought them out, to be honest, because I'm the type of person who, when I want a worksheet, I just kind of create it myself. But I know that a lot of people maybe aren't like that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Okay, because you're a lot like that way. Yeah. All right. Well, if you're listening today and you're like, I really just want someone to have created it for me, let us know if you find that resource, because we'll be happy to share it over here on the show. But obviously, you and I are a little bit more do-it-yourselfers, and I think that that's okay. So I think when somebody's trying to write questions or create their worksheets for individuals or the tools that they're going to use, I do think it's, again, very important to ask, who is your audience? Who are you actually using this for? And it's okay to have different curricula, if you will, for different clients. So even if you have some one-to-one, and, Cody mentioned, well, maybe you don't really do, the worksheet type of thing, but it's okay to have a structure set up for what you want your sessions to look like. Now, what about timing? I think that's another thing that people need to really understand about what they're trying to do, because if you're trying to fit something into, say, a 6-week period versus a 6-month period or a year-long curriculum, those are going to look very, very different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that having a structure would be a good thing. So you have an idea of what that looks like. Now, we do know that the best laid plans of mice and men, right? What about, Cody, do you think about the fact that some people are going to come in and only stay with us for a few weeks versus somebody who says they're going to come in for a year and then leave after 2 months, that kind of thing? I know I didn't set you up for this question, but I'm curious, how do you plan for something like that? How can you actually set a curriculum for something like that when you really don't know what they're going to end up doing?
Yeah, it all depends on how you structure your own structure. So there's many schools of thoughts on this. There are some coaches out there that don't believe in having like any sort of like set time frame. They're just like, hey, like we will hop in, we'll work together, and we'll just go month to month. So it could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 5 years. It could be anything kind of thing. And there's pros and cons to that. But at the same time, I personally like to have a predictable kind of structure that also has some, fluidity to it as well. So the way that I do things is like I have different lengths of programs. Like I have one that's 8 weeks. I have one that's 6 months. I have one that's a year, and those different time frames allow for different types of curriculums, different structures. So I like to have some sort of like parameters on it, so I know like what to expect. I know how to deliver things when they need to be delivered as well, and also meet the clients where they're at too. Leave some room for that as well. And that way, like by the time that they eventually do decide to stop and to go off on their own, I feel good about it. They feel good about it, and it's all good. But there are pros and cons to that way as well. And really the pro and con is like, if you have a set time frame, let's call it 6 months, the likelihood of someone stopping at 6 months may be higher if you just say, hey, we're just going to go month to month. They might be on for 7 months, 8 months kind of thing. But when you have that 6 month marker, you have to make a new decision. Do we want to keep going or not? And just having that decision to make can lead to people saying, hey, I think I'm good at 6 months. So, that's the pros and cons. But, I think that if you have a good experience and you make it a good experience for them within those 6 months and they see the value of keeping going, then that essentially doesn't matter. It's all about how you show up and also, how you support the client during those initial 6 months, for that example. And, sometimes it works in your favor, other times it doesn't. But even if they decide to take a step back, like that's not necessarily a bad thing. That means that they're feeling good. They're feeling confident, which means you did a good job.
Yeah, I agree. Another thing that I've used that has helped kind of with that is just having like a bank of different things that I'm willing to do or talk about with people. So I don't remember if we talked about that on this show before, but I kind of feel like I've talked with you at some point. I just don't know if we were actually sharing any of that. But I'll bring it up now just in case, because it does fall into this whole idea. And whether you're using this with a group or individuals, especially if you have somebody who really, like I said earlier, needs some of that more concrete stuff, like they need to know I'm talking about or learning about this particular topic, then it really helps to have a bank of these. And it can include things like, I already already mentioned retirement. It could be things like different ways of paying off debt, because of course there's the infamous snowball, but there's also several other ways that you can strategize to pay debt off. And so if you have those different areas so that people can learn and then make informed decisions, that's super helpful. One of the really big ones that I have in the bank is communication skills and boundaries. Now, I don't always share that with every single person, because if there's somebody sitting in front of me who has pretty decent boundaries, maybe we don't need to go into that as much. But most people who are sitting in front of me don't have really great boundaries. So it's nice to have that. But if I have a couple sitting in front of me, having the ability to really teach communication skills, if that's lacking for them, has been super helpful. If maybe planning college, something like that, there might be somebody who has no children and doesn't want to have to do that. Maybe their children are grown and it's no longer relevant for them. So I would not encourage you to have this set curriculum where you have on week 1, we're going to talk about this, and week 2, this, and week 3, this, because the people you bring in might not fit into that curriculum. However, do have a variety of topics that you are becoming an expert on so that you can help them become really strong in those different areas as well.
Yeah. I think that there's 2 sides to the coaching curriculum that I think is really important. And I think that one of them is super obvious. And I think the other one gets overlooked sometimes, which is honestly the one that gets overlooked is probably the most important one. So the obvious one is just, obviously helping people with their finances, like getting, the systems in place, the structures, the tools, so for an example, like, you may have a session where you do like an audit on them, like a spending audit, as to see like what's been happening kind of thing. And then you refine things to reflect their goals and values moving forward. You may have one where you show them, how to set up a budget and how to use it. And you might have one where you do like a game plan session. So it's, here's your goals. What do we want to, do first, or do we do these things at the same time? Do we have life insurance? Do we have, this and that and this and that? And, just getting all those kind of like buttons taken care of kind of thing. So that's the obvious stuff. But I think that a lot of people, they go really hard into that and then they stay there because they're not sure what else to cover. Because we are financial coaches, so it's like, well, if I'm not talking about the finances directly all the time, what do I do kind of thing? And that's that's the other side that I think kind of goes unforeseen sometimes, but I think it's the most important one, which is stuff that you kind of alluded to a little bit. It's the internal stuff. It's the life stuff. It's the stuff that it's intertwined with the finances so much that, it's unavoidable. So things like the communication and the boundaries, like that's definitely like an internal kind of thing. Helping people find their why, as to why they want to accomplish these goals. That's an internal thing. I've talked in the past on this show about different visualization exercises and, just stuff like that, like stuff that speaks more to the heart and to the mind versus the spreadsheet. Because I've found that if you really lean into that and you get things into a really powerful place for them, that the spreadsheet stuff and the budgeting stuff and the money stuff goes way smoother. They accomplish way more, and they also feel way more aligned with it too, which that's what I think coaching is really all about. It's not about just making a kick-ass budget and calling it a day. It's about that transformation, the information versus transformation side of things,
Yeah. And so just kind of tying it all together, if you do have some sort of structure like listed out and you're using some sort of worksheets or, sets of information or whatever, it's okay to give that to them. But you want to make sure that you do what Cody just alluded to, and that is help them to take that information and turn it into transformative for them, so that it's not just them hearing all of this, but it's allowing them and helping them to apply that information to their actual scenarios, to their lives, and helping them walk through when they hit the barriers. Because let's get real, they're going to hit barriers and we need to help them work through those different things. So I think that you're right, Cody. I think that there are both sides of those. I think the second one oftentimes gets missed. I do think that coaches are, even if it's not something they're focused on, I think they do intuitively oftentimes know that there is that other side. And so they probably do address it once in a while, even if it's not intentionally. But I'm telling you what, you guys, if you can turn that sporadic into a true intentionality around that part of it, you will help your clients infinitely more than you already are. I guarantee that. So we've basically talked today about the different timeframes that you would put around it. We talked about the different types of curriculum, the different structures you might be able to use. Talked about making sure that you know who you are talking to before you do any of this. And I think we talked about just about anything we think that people are asking about. Is there anything that we missed, Cody, that you are hearing before we close up today?
There's one last thing that I want to say, which I think is important. As you're thinking about this curriculum and you're building it, I think that it's important to have some sort of structure to where it's like, in the first meeting, I want to cover this. In the second or third, it might be a good idea to talk about this. But I don't want you to be married to it. Because personal finance is personal. Sometimes it makes sense to go off the track with someone and meet them where they're at and then come back to it later, kind of thing. So don't try and fit the round thing in the square hole kind of thing, or whatever that saying is, right? Have your structure, but allow it to also be fluid as well.
Yeah.
Even a part of my curriculum is showing up to a session with no agenda. And I'll tell them that. I'll hop on and I'll say, hey, for today, I do want to just, check in with the budget and just make sure everything's good to go. But beyond that, I don't have anything planned today, guys. I want to meet you where you're at, and I want to hear from you. Like, what do you need support with? What do you have questions on? What's going on in your life that you think is affecting you? That kind of thing, and those are the ones that I have found that have actually been some of the best meetings. Is because they don't feel like, it's like this tailor, or it's like this generic thing that they're going through. Like, they actually feel appreciated, they feel heard, they feel valued, and you're meeting them where they're at, and you're actually speaking to them for what they need the most in that moment. So I would highly recommend that you have the structure, that you're not completely married to it, but that you also have some room to where you just give them the power as well.
Yeah, agreed. I'm glad you added that. Are you familiar with the storybooks? Oftentimes it's with kids, but sometimes it's with adults too, where they have the basis foundation, and then whatever you choose determines the next page. Do you know what I'm talking about? You can go and it's almost like you're writing your own story, kind of. So you determine the direction of the story, and that it kind of feels like what
Mad
you're
Libs?
talking about here. No, it's not Mad Libs. There, you're just filling in stuff, and it ends up being silly. But no, this is they give you the story, part of it, and then it's path A goes this way and path B goes this way, and you as the reader are able to decide which path it goes on. And so it kind of sounds like that, where you have the foundational piece already set, but you have written enough paths in that story where whatever they decide to go, you are able to accommodate that for them. Based on what their decisions are, what they need to talk about. And that totally empowers them. And it also makes you still seem like, you know what you're talking about, because you have some understanding of these different areas. And yet if they choose this one over here, you're like, oh, I got that. If they choose this over here, you got that. But it's not you forcing that on them because they made that choice. So yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, and I appreciate you tying it up with a little bow. So all right. Well, we have come to the end of this episode. Again, I just want to remind you, I know we were giving you everything we know you want, but it is one of those very broad questions. So if you have a very specific question that was, created because of what we talked about today, we do encourage you to go to that Facebook group, type it right in there for us. We'd be happy to answer that for you. And I think that's it for today, right? We're okay. Yep. Just want to make sure. All right, you guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. We really appreciate each and every one of you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on the Financial Coaches Podcast. Have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Financial Coaches Podcast, brought to you by New Money Habits and Sizemore Financial Coaching. Submit your questions to our hosts by emailing podcast@newmoneyhabits.com. Be sure to subscribe to be notified of future episodes and join our growing group of like-minded coaches on Facebook. And until next time, happy coaching. Music provided by Summer School.